Welcome back to Issues and Interviews with Kieran Lalor on the Hudson Power Broker YouTube channel. We have a great guest today, my friend and colleague, Erik Haight, the Republican Election Commissioner in Dutchess County. Erik, how are you?
I'm doing well, Kieran. How are you?
Good, good. You're the man of the hour because everybody about elections generally, election security, and kind of the operations of how elections work, at least in Dutchess County in New York State. So I have a lot of questions for you. I've been getting emails and direct messages to me directly in my capacity as a member of the Assembly. So now I'm just going to shift the burden off on you and try to get some answers.
That's okay. I'm used to that from you, Kieran.
Okay, good. So, first question is, were you surprised? Did anything surprise you with election night and the results, election 2 weeks, really, the results of the most recent election here in Dutchess County?
If there was a surprise for me, there'd be two things. The initial surge in early voting participation and the close margin between Judge Peter Foreman and challenger Jessica Siegel. Those were two surprises for me.
So why did that surprise you? Peter was on the show twice. I campaigned with him and for him. He won a primary. I think he won the independence primary earlier in the year. I was surprised that he lost, but when I thought about it, Joe Biden, I knew was going to do better than Trump in Dutchess County, although not by that much because I knew Hillary narrowly beat Trump last time. So a lot of it, as candidates, we think, it's all about us. But a lot of it is the environment. A lot of it is the top of the ticket and coattails and everything else. So wouldn't it have been very hard for Peter Foreman to win if Joe Biden won the county by several thousand votes with him running just countywide?
That race was always going to be competitive. And I also always saw that race being close. But what you also have, is a 22-year incumbent with all that experience and all that stability and all that experience that I felt the moderates would carry the day for him. And what we didn't see in the election results, whether it be early voting, election day, or absentee voting, about 80% of the moderates were voting left. And that's a staggering number when typically, it's in the 50 to 55% range, either left or right, sometimes right down the middle. To have the moderates, the blank voters, no party affiliated voters break that hard Democrat was something I didn't see coming.
Why do you think that was? Biden?
There's a couple factors there. I think, over the last 4 years, there's been a tremendous migration from the South into Dutchess County, which has changed the demographics here significantly. There's roughly 20,000 more Democrats in Dutchess County now than Republicans, which is a big number, which is new to this election cycle. I think we also had a very unpopular president that, hurt the down ticket candidates, with the exception of Sue Sereno. She is the, probably the exception to the rule for all of these trends.
Yeah, that's an interesting race, too, because she only won by 600 votes 2 years ago. My thought on this election versus the 2018 election was, in 2018, Republicans got all the bad of Trump and none of the good because he wasn't on the ballot. This year, we got all the bad of Trump, but we also got all the good. And I think in Sue Sereno's case, it played a role. But that doesn't really fit with Foreman then. I know Sue she has some Putnam County and she doesn't have two towns in Dutchess, but I wonder why Sue was able to prevail and not Foreman. Part of it could be Sue's out there as a political figure, whereas a judge, unless you commit a felony or you're a lawyer, you probably don't see Peter Foreman.
You know what I think the big difference is in that particular contrast between Foreman and Sereno? Both worked extremely hard. Both worked with about the same amount of resources, campaign-wise. But and you touched on it, Sue's out there, but not only is she out there campaigning, throughout this entire pandemic, Senator Sereno's office and her constituent services have been fantastic. So when people of all stripes, colors, races, creed, party affiliation need help with unemployment, with what other kind of government services people needed during the pandemic, Sue was there for them. And, I think her doing her job as senator made her doing her job as a candidate that much easier. And it paid off on election night and in the absentees. I mean, going through the absentee ballots, there were thousands of Biden, Jessica Siegel, Sue Sereno votes.
Wow.
People voting across the entire row A, dropping down for Senator Sereno and going right back up, continuing where they, like to roost.
Yeah.
And, that just goes to show Senator Sereno's appeal and how much he helped people.
Yeah, that's cool. Also, she appeared on the show, which has got to be worth a couple thousand votes.
One would hope.
Yes. So, one thing on election night, so we're looking at our phones at 9:15, and, I usually win by a hefty margin. And usually in the past, before there was early voting, I was, even when there was 10% of the vote in, it looked like it was going to look at the end when 100% of the vote was in. But when the early voting came in, I was down 2-1. I would say 15,000 to 5,000. And obviously that changed. But the early voting was about 2-1 against me, and the absentee voting was about 2-1 against me. And I think probably all Republicans, maybe more so in other cases. Did that surprise you that those two, the early and the late voting, or the early and the absentee voting, were so slanted one way?
No, I expected that. Anyone that asked me, I said, expect these early voting numbers to be ugly.
Yeah. They're
the first ones we upload into the system. And then, as the other poll sites report in throughout the county, obviously then the city of Poughkeepsie, which is closest to the office here, is first, right? So the demographics of the city of Poughkeepsie are such that, it made the early voting numbers look even worse. Early voting wise, about 18,000 Democrats voted throughout those 9 days, to our 7,000. Absentee wise, there were 15,000 Democrats that voted Republican to our 6,000. So they crushed us early in absentee. And then on election day, 24,000 Democrats voted on election day to our 34,000 Republicans. So, our base, the reps and cons, really did want to vote on election day. And those that couldn't still voted early and by absentee to a certain extent. But man, they came out in droves on election day. I mean, we had 78% turnout overall in Dutchess County between the three forms of voting. But we outperformed the Democrats overall on turnout. Reps and cons turned out countywide 82% of those enrolled, to the Democrats 80%. And then obviously the race is always in the middle. 70% of the 22,000 NOPs voted, which is 70% of the enrollment, and they decided the race.
And I know national record, Trump got the second most votes ever, and Biden got the most votes ever. Is that true in Dutchess County also? Was that the most votes ever?
Yes.
County for anything, not just president?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Tell you, I honestly like to see high turnout. The amount of time, effort, and resources we put in running elections, and to have no one use it, whether 2 people show up or 200,000 people show up, we still have to put out the same amount of effort here, with our wonderful staff, Democrats and Republicans. We do a great job together. And I like to see people use it and take advantage of their right to vote.
Yeah, good point. We're joined by Erik Haight, Republican election commissioner in Dutchess County. How long have you been the commissioner? I think you've been in as long as I've been in, right?
10 years now, Kieran.
Oh, okay, well, you got me beat.
Yeah. It's been a fun ride.
Good run. You had a lot of changes too, because you had a real adversarial situation with the previous Democrat in your office, but now you have much better. I know, just going in there to file my petitions, it used to be like walking into a really uncomfortable situation, and now everybody's kind of working together.
Well, to touch on that, yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting ride. My first counterpart was indicted and removed from office forcefully for stealing old ladies' absentee ballots in her capacity as a commissioner.
Yeah.
My second counterpart was a complete misogynist bully, and would harass all the women in this office. And then you have my third counterpart, who is honest, hardworking, and has some of the highest ethical guidelines that I've ever met in anybody.
Nice.
Now, do we agree on anything political? No. She's a flag-waving liberal, and God love her, but we run a great office here. We administer efficient elections. I tell you one thing, at the end of the day, our results are going to be accurate. We're hoping to certify today or tomorrow, and we're methodical, we're careful, and we make sure that every vote that should count is counted.
Yeah, that's good. Good office functioning well and having a good counterpart. You're saying the count is going to be accurate. I've gotten a lot of emails. Find out if New York uses Dominion and Smartmatic, which are controversial nationally because of what happened in Michigan and possibly in Georgia. But do we use that here in New York or in Dutchess County?
Yes, we use Dominion voting systems. Of the 62 counties, Dominion has, more than half. The other approved system by the State Board of Elections is ES&S. I don't have much experience with them, but we've used Dominion since the switch over from the lever machines to the scanning devices for about 11 years.
Do you have any concerns there with Dominion?
Not a single concern. Based on our bipartisan system of our office, the election management system is a very secure, very sensitive system. It is not connected to the internet. There is by no means for anyone to hack the Dominion voting system. In order to get into the election management system room itself that has a contained server, you have to be with a Democrat and a Republican in order to get into that room. No one party can be in that room at one time. No one party can be in that system at one time. So in order to change the results or vote swapping or these things that are being talked about nationally is simply not a possibility in New York or specifically the Dutchess County.
So, the Smartmatic became a term that we know, or Dominion became a term that we know because Michigan, there was an error. I guess it was said to be human error. 6,000 votes went one way, and they should have gone the other way. They went for Biden, but they really should have been for Trump. It was fixed. What's in place to prevent human error from those kind of surprising that somebody could make a mistake and 6,000 votes could go the wrong way. Presidential election, it probably doesn't matter, but a U.S. House race, certainly a state legislative race, that could be a big deal.
Yeah, whether it's one vote or 6,000 votes, it shouldn't be happening. And, I don't know how they do things in Detroit or Michigan or Georgia, but here in Dutchess County, that type of human error is just impossible. We do an audit, a 3% audit of some machines that are randomly selected. We hand count the ballots from those machines. We then compare it with the results tape that are computer generated. And in the 11 years that we've had Dominion, that audit has come back perfect every single time. There's not a single vote cast that hasn't been read properly. And then the data cards that come out of the machines, out of the Dominion machine, goes into the Dominion election management system. So there is no human data entry. It's from the card into the system, and then we do the random selection of the audit to be sure that the machines are counting the ballots correctly. Before we even deploy the machines on election day, we spend 4 weeks doing what's called running test decks through the machines. And we have stacks and stacks of test ballots with every possible scenario that a voter could choose on their ballot. And we run those ballots through the machines in our secured warehouse where only a Dem and a Republican can be at the same time. And we know what the results should be at the end of that test deck, and we compare the tape from the results with what we know the test deck should show, and they match every time. Otherwise, we would not put that machine out on election day. Any machine that is malfunctioning, we either fix it or we set it aside.
Do Dominion employees have access to it, or vendors to fix it or anything, or is it only commissioners?
So it's only our staff. So even the commissioners don't have access to the warehouse where we keep the machines or the election management system room. Dominion itself has no access to our machines unless we invite them in. And if we do, it's a tech who is there with a Democrat and a Republican that is fixing some mechanical error. But there's certainly never any unsupervised assistance from any vendor. Even the landlord at the warehouse can't get into the space that we lease, which was kind of an odd situation for him at first. But It's very, very secure.
And what about the absentee ballots? They just come in over time via mail, and then
Right.
how do they get secured?
Right. So we had a tremendous amount of paper absentee ballots this year. There's about 31,000 that we counted. We issued 35,000. When they come into the office from the mail or via a drop box, a bipartisan team is at the counter taking in the mail, time stamps that absentee ballot together. A different bipartisan team then enters the envelope itself into the system so that voter has voter history. So when Kieran Lalor is calling to see who hasn't voted by absentee yet, I can provide a list of those that we've issued and those that we've received. From there, a bipartisan team takes the ballot after it's been received into the system to the cure team. The cure team is something new this year based on law, but the bipartisan cure team then reviews every signature with the signature of record in our system. If there is a defect, we were required to contact that voter, give them an opportunity to cure that defect. Internally from the cure team, it then goes to the filing team, which is a bipartisan team. We have a secure room that, again, you can't get into without a dem and a rep, where there's about 30 file cabinets in there, one for at least each town. The larger towns get two. And then we file each of those absentee ballots by election district. And at the end of the day, when we finished our work, that door gets locked with a Democrat lock and a Republican lock.
I'm glad to hear that. That's a good system. I'm pleasantly surprised. Usually I hear how things in New York work, and I'm like, I can't believe that this is how it works. But,
well, I think the various naysayers of our system are just taking pot shots, at what really are, at the end of the day, dedicated public servants. Could New York City do a better job? Yeah, but could the mayor provide them the resources that they need to do a better job? Sure. The Suffolk County executive taking shots at the boards of elections, using New York City Board of Elections as an excuse. It's just not fair. It's not ethical, and it's not being honest with the public, because frankly, the system I just outlined is what every single boards of elections in this state undertakes, and we take it seriously. And listen, I would think that the system that we have should be uniform across the country. The Democrat and a Republican constantly cross-checking each other, always looking over the other's shoulder. This thing in Georgia, where they find 6,000 votes, that wouldn't happen here. In Broward County, Florida, where some guy was at the airport with a trunk full of ballots, that wouldn't happen here, because there's always a Dem and a rep with that ballot at all times for ballot security, and there's always a chain of custody.
That's good. Checks and balances, just like
all the way.
Intended. You and I had talked before early voting became the law, and there was some research that said early voting doesn't increase voter turnout. I know we had high voter turnout this year. Was that early voting, or was that just this mega election with, a very passionate base behind Trump and a very passionate base against Trump?
Well, traditionally, Dutchess County is around 80% every presidential election cycle. This year, we're at 78%. So all that surge of voting that happened early, it just cannibalized election day voting. Right. So there's been no overall increase of turnout. We already have, I think, a pretty good turnout, above the state average, above the national average, and I'm proud of that. But did it increase turnout? No. Did it make voting more convenient? Yes. It's very costly. It's very time-consuming, but it did not increase turnout.
That's very interesting. I was really interested to hear that because I remember you and I talked about this a couple times, both on the radio and in person. So that's very interesting. That kind of you were right, basically.
Yeah, on occasion.
I mean, a week before the election, people in Fishkill are lined up for 5 hours in the rain waiting to vote. So I don't know how convenient that was. I think that was more making a statement, or kind of a political statement by people that they're willing to stand out in the rain and vote against Trump. I think in most cases 2-1. There was a bill that passed this year, and it hasn't been signed yet, but the governor still has month and a half to sign it, automatic voter registration, where basically to boil it, to make it, to simplify it, and I remember this from debating this bill, but basically if you sign up for welfare, you'll get automatically registered to vote. You sign up for a pistol permit, you will not get automatically registered to vote. The only person stopping automatic voter registration right now is the governor. He can sign it, veto it, or do nothing. I was against it because I think it is slanted to get Democrat votes versus Republican votes. But A, do you think that's going to be signed? If you have any insights on that, and B, do you think it would be good if it was signed?
Well, I wouldn't pretend to know what the governor's thinking. If it's about him, he'll probably do it. If it helps him, he'll probably do it. If it somehow screws somebody else over that's one of his enemies, he'll probably do it. So, is it good? The answer is no. It's not good. It's a very simple task to register to vote. We have 200,000 of them in Dutchess County, and if you're going to interface with the government for any type of government service, you should be offered the right to vote. You should be offered the ability to register, but to automatically register you, I think is wrong. A lot of people that aren't registered to vote are intentionally not registered to vote, whether they're trying to dodge jury duty or whether they're just don't want to be harassed by politicians like you, knock on their door 10 times to make sure they vote. There's people that I have spoken to that have said they are intentionally not registered. Yeah. So the second they go to renew their driver's license, next thing you know, without their knowledge, they're on the voter rolls, and then then you're signed up for jury duty.
Right. And you mentioned something about whether the governor would sign it or not, depending on his enemies. He changed, I guess, although I voted against it, we changed the threshold for the third parties, and some of the third parties that we've been used to, such as the Independence Party, are not automatically going to be on the ballot anymore, and may not be on the ballot at all if they don't get a whole bunch of signatures every year now. Number one, do you think that the number of ballot lines matters? I know a lot of people think, I have Republican, conservative, green, working families, and I have all these ballot lines, and I'm going to win because I have all these ballot lines. My position has always been the electorate is the electorate, and they find you where they want to find you, but it doesn't change the number of votes. Your thoughts on that?
I think you're mostly right, Kieran. I think the number of party lines is helpful marginally, but the voters will find you on the ballot if you're on the ballot. But here's the difference. There are at times Democrats that want to vote for Republicans that simply cannot bring themselves to vote for a Republican on the Republican or conservative line. And this is where Cuomo's vindictiveness has very effectively hurt the Republican Party by essentially ending the Independence Party. I mean, he's killed the Independence Party. They don't exist anymore because of the governor. It's that line where Democrats could hold their nose and vote for a hardworking Republican like yourself and feel good about it. I think there's a lot of Democrats that will simply not vote for us because they can't find some neutral party line.
Right.
So the only parties that will exist moving forward, at least until the next gubernatorial election, is the Democrat, Republican, Conservative, and Working Families party lines. So, I don't think that disenfranchises voters. I think it's very inside baseball of what lines you have, and I think the governor, came up a little bit short of screwing over his enemies because he was really gunning for the Working Families Party when they did not endorse him, and they went with Cynthia Nixon in the last gubernatorial cycle. But he still got about 95% of his enemies with that swipe.
Yeah, good point. That's
Yeah.
great. I'll leave it right there. Erik Haight, Republican Election Commissioner for 10 years here in Dutchess County. Keep up the good work. I appreciate the time. That was really interesting. I learned a lot, and it was very interesting. I'm looking forward to helping people understand our voting system here in New York.
Well, thanks, Kieran. I appreciate the time, and congratulations on your 57% victory.
It was big. What happened?
Hey, maybe you're getting lazy in your old age, Kieran.
No. All right. Thanks again, Erik. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.